We actually filmed this video last year but weren't able to release it due to a few production issues. As a result, you'll see that the DC5's flybys were shot elsewhere, in this case, Buckinghamshire. Race still has the DC5 but it's now rocking a monstrous K24 conversion, while I ended up chopping the E46 M3 in for a manual F82 and 4. More on both those cars another time.
There's an ongoing debate at the shooting brake offices. If you have 10 to 20 grand to spend on a fun, usable driver's car, should you get an E46 M3 or a Honda Integra DC5? I argued that a straight 6 and rear-wheel drive trumps all, so I bought an E46 M3. Our consignment specialist Race, however, said that the 400 kilo lighter weight of the DC5 and the 400 RPM higher red line hits the M3 where it hurts. Right, before we get into this, I know what you're thinking, these cars are clearly modified, but the modifications that I've done to my M3 are the typical ones that most enthusiasts would want to do for fast road use. So to start with, we've got a square setup. What that means is these normally come on staggered wheels, 18x9s on the rear, 18x8s on the front. I've got 18x9s all round. And I've also dialed in a bit of negative camber to help get the front turned in. Once you come into the inside, the E46 M3 is notorious for having quite a high driving position, especially in the coupes. Personally, I find this really bothered me, so I've got a Recaro SPG in here. This is a similar setup to the CSL, not quite the same seat, but it fits me really nicely. It's a non-adjustable seat, but it gets the driving position exactly where you want it. As a result, heel and toe, steering height is bang on. Right, let's get into it. Right, we're in my E46 M3 Coupe. It's a manual, it's slightly modified, as you've seen. I'm going to tell you what it's like to drive down this Welsh B road. I'm really just going to focus on the driving fun aspects. You know what these cars are about, we reviewed E46 M3s before, but this is just a focused review on what this car is actually like to drive. So first off, E46 M3, the S54 just dominates the experience, so just listen to this. What a great engine. Mine was not got an airbox or anything like that, standard exhaust, standard intake. I personally love it. I love the raspy exhaust that you get and the mechanical noise from the valve train that you hear. When you get an airbox in these, they sound fantastic, but you do lose, it does hide some of that noise, which for me personally, I think is actually a bit of a shame. So I prefer these with a standard airbox, with a standard exhaust. Some people like a deeper exhaust, I personally really like the rasp. So let's break it down piece by piece, get straight into it. That engine is brilliant. So first things first, you've got amazing mid-range torque from 3K to 6K onwards. It is a revvy, individual throttle-bodied, cammed engine, but it's still a 3.2 with a long stroke, so you do actually get a surprise amount of torque. When I first drove an E46 M3, I was expecting Honda VTEC-like power delivery, but actually it's super usable. You can get where you're going pretty well without actually having to rev it out, but when you do, you're rewarded with oral pleasure. It is just unbelievable how good this thing sounds close to the red line. And that power delivery is so progressive. You know exactly what you're getting as you meter in the throttle, and you've got a nice long throttle on these. It's not snatchy. You can put it into sport mode, shorten the throttle. I don't know why you do that, to be honest. You just kind of lose progression for no reason. But I've always liked a long throttle. That's just me. Next thing is steering. In my opinion, a weak point for the E46 M3, one that no one really talks about, is not the best steering system. It's a hydraulic rack, which is great. It's a variable ratio, so it gets quicker towards the outer edges of the rack. It's a bit numb. The steering wheel's ridiculously thick and padded, so that numbs it even more. And it's a bit slow. You've got this dead zone in the middle, which I believe is engineered in to make it stable at high speeds, which I don't understand. Obviously, BMW spec their M cars to be stable on the Autobahn at 130, 140, etc. But on the UKB road, it means you're giving half turn a lock for pretty normal corners, where in something like a Porsche 911, you'll just be kind of flicking around with the wrist. So that's a bit frustrating. But you do get used to it, and there's something quite fun and engaging about having to really, use the steering and get armfuls of lock on. And once you get used to it, it does fade into the background, but it's just not really telling you that much. It's telling you enough, but just not that much. You can get a purple tag rack in these, but I think they actually make the steering a bit too quick. For me personally, everyone's different, Next thing's up, gearbox. So people often get shorter diff ratios than these. Personally, I don't mind the standard gears. They are a bit long, but they're okay for the road. You're between second and third, which is where you want to be on a UKB road. The actual shift action of the gearbox isn't particularly nice. It's okay, it's not great. I've got short shift in this, which actually makes it worse. I'm not really a big fan of that. but it's a very, very strong gearbox. People have rated this gearbox up to 800, 900 horsepower on boosted cars. It's overkill for this car. So from an ownership point of view, as much as it's not necessarily the nicest gearbox to use, I wouldn't change it for anything because it's a heavy GT gearbox, heavy GT linkage. And the other thing is you will never miss shift in this box because it's got such an easily readable linkage. Next up is brakes. So this was when BMW was still in the habit of giving their M cars single-sided calipers. These brakes, they're not bad. They will fade if you have standard pads and fluid and you drive the car hard, they will. But if you get uprated pads, uprated fluid, it doesn't cost much, you just did that to any car you own anyway. They're actually fine on the road. I haven't actually got these to fade at all and I've really, really tried. But the first M3 I had standard brakes, standard fluid. First time I drove that home, I faded the brakes within 3 hard stops. That was really bad. So I'm actually happy with these brakes, and the single silent caliper does mean you get a lot of pedal feel. You know what these brakes are doing. Not as nice as the Porsche 911, fine, but they are good enough. And I don't think you should bother spending, you know, £1 or £2 or £3 on upgrading them with APs or D2s or whatever people put on these. Next up, we've got the chassis. So we've got rear-wheel drive chassis here, 50-50 weight distribution, and a limited slip diff. Bit of a part-time LSD in these. It's a viscous LSD, doesn't always lock up, but for fast driving it's great. You'll never get a one-tyre fire. You just won't often get reliable, big, smoky drifts. Most of the time you will, but you can't always depend on it like you can with the E39 M5. But it's a great diff, and it lets you drive the car very, very hard, and the confidence that you're going to have a very predictable back end. I'm giving an absolutely unholy amount of throttle through this corner, and it's handling it just fine. It is such a neutral, beautiful chassis. If you just watched this video and you got up to this point, you're probably thinking there's a fair few negatives of the gearbox and the brakes and the steering, but the chassis and the engine make up for all of it. It's quite a heavy chassis, you're managing the weight quite a lot, that's fine. But the actual balance of the chassis is stunning, it's gorgeous, there's so much to say about it. This car is so fun below 100 miles an hour, which, considering the performance and offer, is actually quite impressive. So that means that you can have loads of fun in this on the road, because you can have fun in just second and third gear down the country lane without losing a license, without doing anything stupid, without doing anything antisocial. You can have a lot of fun in this car. As an ownership proposition, it's absolutely brilliant and probably the best balance that BMW M ever did, because the later cars got faster and heavier. This is a nice size on the road. It's short, it's stubby, it's not too wide, even with those bulbous arches that make it look so, so good. And in this interior, we've got great visibility. It's a really nice design, I really like it. The driving position is brilliant, we've got great pedal position for heel and towing. If you've never driven a BMW before, you have to get used to the floor-mounted pedal, but heel and towing is super easy in this. All the pedal gaps and weightings and throws are really good. Brilliant, beautiful, readable gauges in front of me that tell me exactly what I need to know. As a tool for driving, E46 M3, it's hard to beat. And it's the quintessential layout. We've got straight sticks up front, rear-wheel drive, LSD, decent brakes. It's everything the enthusiast wants and more. I love this car. This one's rusty, it's high miles, high owners. I just don't care. I just bought it to drive, and I love driving it. I love driving. You'd have to rip me out with this, honestly, especially down a Welsh Beaver like this. It's just absolutely brilliant. And the best thing about an M3 is that normally the fun stops when the rain comes, but with that LSD, 330 brake on offer, to be honest, I actually prefer driving this in the wet because you can have a bit of fun. Right, overall, E46 M3, brilliant driver's car, has got some flaws, some quite inherent flaws, but overall, when you're driving it, you don't really think about that. I wouldn't say it's a compromised car. It's a car that could be better, it could be improved. Much of the improvements can be done by yourself if you're into modifying cars. You can get a quicker steering wheel, you can get better brakes, you can mess around in different BMW linkages that they have on offer, and you can do a bit of weight reduction here and there. But overall, even out of the box, these cars are just so great. There's something so fine about them, just the way they're set up, the way they're balanced. They're so much more than the sum of their parts. You know, you could stick an S54 into an E36 or an E46 330 or whatever, but an E46 M3 out of the box, the way it drives, the way it's set up, is just gorgeous. It's gorgeous. If you haven't driven one, you have to try one. You absolutely have to try one. And they're completely worth the prices they command. They're completely worth getting all the big jobs done, all that kind of stuff. And I really, really back these cars. But I'm keen to hear what the DC5 is like. I'm keen to get in it and see what 400 kilos less weight is like to drive. So let's get to that. Much like my M3, this Integra has some of the usual enthusiast mods that you typically see on these cars. We've got lightweight wheels, coilover suspension, some breathing mods, and some braces. Nothing that drastically changes the car, but it just makes it a little bit focused for fun driving. Right, we're in my colleague Race's Honda Integra DC5 here, and immediately this car feels far more driver focused than my M3. So driving position, I'm sitting quite high up, but actually that's partially because the dash and the door line is quite low. But I've got a good view of the roads. A-pillar is a bit thick, but it's not too bad. Pedal position, perfect for heel and towing. They're all top hinged. Decent weight, they're a bit light on the pedals, but it's fine, but really just well set up heel and toe, which I always find in Japanese cars. These seats are so nice. They're reclinable, they're comfortable, they hug you in the corners. Perfect. Recaro always no recliners, these are no different. Got a short shift on this, not a huge fan, generally not a huge fan of short shifters, but it's okay, and you can tell that the inherent linkage properties of the Integra are great. Now, first thing you notice is the steering. The steering weights up super nicely and is very quick. It feels like steering designed for a sports car, unlike the M3, it just feels like steering designed for a saloon car. But it's quite numb, there's not a huge amount of feel. But the real highlight point in the DC5, aside from the engine, which we'll get to in a bit, is the weight of the chassis. So we've got 1,170 kilograms weight here. That is ridiculously light. As a result, the chassis is super readable. And it means that 220 horsepower gets you quite far. So I'm going to show you what a VTEC crossover is like now. Tiny bit of torque still at the top end, but that noise, I mean, for a four-cylinder engine is great. And then because this is front-wheel drive and lightweight, you can just fly. Once you get it into a corner, you can basically just spin it, and the LSD pulls you in, and you can just stay flat, which 8,400 RPM. Oh my God, sorry, just immediately this feels so much better set up for the job of driving. I've got traditional heel and toe here, as in my toe is on the brake and my heel is on the throttle. You're not able to roll your foot over like on the BMW. And the engine just sounds absolutely incredible. It just dominates everything. The induction noise is so good. Strong brakes, got Brembo 4 pots here. You'll never get these to fade on 1,100 kilos worth of car. Not the best pedal feel, but it's not too bad. I mean, you can just wham them really. You don't really need any pedal feel. Incredible turning, and that LSD pulls the car in as you apply more throttle. What a machine! You can drive this so much quicker straight away than you can the M3. It's so much less intimidating. Partially because of the weight, partially because of the front-wheel drive nature, but also because all the primary controls are much better set up for an enthusiast. As a result, this car is quite buzzy on the motorway, it's quite twitchy, but it's fine. But you can tell that Honda took a much more focused approach with who they set this up for. Doesn't have the outright overtaking power of the BMW, but it's good enough. You have to use the gearbox a bit more. But it's a lovely box. Really, really easy to use. With this short shifter, you can't rush the shifts too much, but it's okay. Now, the one criticism I do have, aside from the steering feeling a bit numb, so the way the steering rack is mounted in the DC5, the steering is mounted on the firewall. As a result, the tie rods have quite a strong angle in them, and you get really, really strong bumps here. So this is extremely bumpy Welsh B road here, particularly bumpy, even bumpier than usual, and it will really having to keep a hand on the steering. It's going to run away from you if you don't keep a firm grip on it. Normally I'd always advise keeping a light grip on the steering, but in this you really need to make sure you're holding on tight, because otherwise it's just going to want to follow every single crack and crevice. Now, if you get this car hard on the brakes, you get it upset, you can get some rotation from that back end. There's not a lot of weight over the back, and you can get some pretty nice lift off oversteer, but it's not snappy, it's not a Peugeot 205. It's really, really easy to use, and it's quite exploitable. It's quite an exploitable chassis, which I find very fun. Some people might find intimidating. I think if you're buying a car like this, you want something that's a bit playful. Would I buy one over an E46 M3? I think it completely comes down to whether or not you like getting the back end out. I think to drive on a B road, this is the more engaging, more focused, more enthusiast focused car. And I think most drivers would probably be quicker in this than they would in M3, because the chassis is that little bit more friendly. Aside from that bump stick, which is it's quite something, that's to be said. But yeah, this is just out of the box. For the job of driving, this is set up a lot better, you know. Nice quick steering, strong brakes. But there is an element of it that's just a little bit more two-dimensional. I wouldn't say lack of torque from the engine, but lacking the big mid-range punch that a big engine would have does mean it's 10/10 or nothing. But when 10/10 are that accessible, you can get on it, you can do it. So it's not really a downside. It just comes down to driving style. If you're more into cruising around, feeling the power of the car but not using it that much, this isn't the car for you. You should get an M3 because you can enjoy an M3 in that way. But if you like really getting on it, really just going 10/10 down the road, getting the best out of the road, the best out of the car, I would say out of the box, this is a better proposition than an M3, it really is. The other thing is, I see one of these and I just think Matt Neal and a Halford Speed touring cars as a kid. And it really does have that touring car feel. I haven't managed to find any understeer in this yet. Maybe I'm not trying hard enough, but it does seem like a very well set up chassis. Really, really nice sharp turning. Downsides, well, it's not that quick, but it is fast enough. I would say it's fast enough to enjoy on the road. Oh, but the noise makes up for it. You feel like you're going quick. Surely that's good enough. So this is my first time driving a fast front-wheel drive car, performance-oriented front-wheel drive car. I am definitely a rear-wheel drive purist, and I love playing around with rear-wheel drive dynamics. But what I will say, the drivetrain layout of this car just fades into the background. It's not something you interact with a huge amount. The main thing is that turning, that chassis balance, the weight of the car, the lightweight of the car, and that raucous riot of a VTEC K20 engine. Would I buy one of these over an E46 M3? I don't know, it's so hard. The thing is, I think this car gives a lot the second you get into it. It's way more accessible, but I do think an E46 M3 at the top line does offer sharper thrills if you push the car harder. I think for most people, most use cases, this is the better enthusiast car, but if you really want the absolute best in driver's car hedonism, straight six, SP4, 300 plus brake, rear wheel drive, it does win over, but most of the time this is a better car. But on the occasional day where the road and the day is perfect, which isn't today, the M3 with the right mods is more fun. Standard for standard, I think this would absolutely win. Basically, it all depends on what you want. If you want a better car most of the time, it's this. If you want the better car on a perfect day, on a perfect road, and everything's great, and you've got space to play around with the back end, and the M3 edges it, just by a tiny bit. But God, you would be happy with both, you really would. This is just, I mean, listen to that, and the ratios are perfectly stacked to keep you in that VTEC power band. And this turn, I'm just gonna wham the throttle here. It just turns in on the throttle. I've never experienced that in my life. That is just so good.
As you can see, I was rather taken by this DC5. It was so clearly set up for the keen driver, short-geared and immediately agile. It lacked the depth and three-dimensionality of the M3, however. It provided instant gratification, but there was very little car to get to know. The M3, on the other hand, has inherent flaws. The weight of the car and the saloon-like feel to it makes it a less exciting car most of the time. But when it does come alive, you have 6 cylinders screaming through individual throttle bodies, sending power to the rear wheels attached to a beautifully balanced, organic feeling chassis. Get it on the right road with the right mods and few things come close. Both cars can be had for around £15,000. The DC5 is a better car for most enthusiasts. For those with a few more screws loose, only the M3 will do. However, when you put a K24 on the DC5, I think that might skew it the other way. Racer's DC5 now has just that and is listed live for sale on shootingbrake.com for auction. You can flick through over 100 detailed photographs, read through the full spec list and place a bid at your convenience. My name's Ghaleb, you're watching Shooting Brake. Thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.